This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's edition of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, as always, my guy, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. On today's show, we got a great broadcast, going to break down the Detroit Pistons, and finally got a chance to listen to Trajan Langdon. What in his message can we take away in regards to the draft? It's tonight, just a couple hours from now. We are recording just a few hours before the NBA draft, and it kind of feels like everybody kind of gets a sense of where the Pistons are going to select, but could they trade down for assets? We're going to read into everything that Trajan Langdon said, and boy, cuz you know it's true. When the DOC says, hey, Tom Gores, you maybe don't want to be speaking to the media. You may just want to type up a letter and send it out. And boy, was it crazy. We'll talk about that side of it as well. The words that were said were not bad. The delivery of those said words was real bad, and it was crazy. And I guess learning now that Tom Gores must have some Middle East blood or something in him, because he showed up an hour late, claimed it was traffic, and it was funny. I'll share what it was like being there. I decided to go down there for the first time to see what the Performance Center was like. It's really smack dab downtown. It's easy to get to from the office, because real easy to get to in terms of 75 to the Davison, and boom, you're like within really 15 minutes from the office to get to the Pistons practice facility. And we'll talk about it. One of the great Game 7s. I got to check it out. I taped it maybe half hour behind on Monday, and I was hyper-focused on that second period when it was 1-1, and I saw the game-winning goal, and then it was a frenetic frenzy. I thought the celebration was unreal. It was great to see, and we'll talk about the Red Wings, who made a lot of noise this week with a transaction that kind of shocked people. People are saying, okay, these moves that Steve Yzerman is making ahead of the draft maybe are set up for some blockbuster, but still haven't heard about it yet. We'll talk all about it. So, cuz had a chance to go down and decided, okay, the Pistons invite me regularly to go to the media sessions. I don't go too often because it's just really not a lot of buzz is generated. It's kind of, you know the Pistons in regards to kind of how their media is viewed, and it's just kind of straightforward. There's a lot of just like, okay, it's just the team is young, doesn't fit together, it's not a good team. There's not a lot of traction other than a lot of hate for the Pistons, so there's really a lot of diminishing return from our end. So that's why we don't really talk about it all that much. But I wanted to go down there, just kind of get a vibe of what would be asked, kind of have an opportunity maybe even to ask a question, but because it was funny. Because I RSVP'd and they sent me a message back and they said, questions that will be asked will be reserved first for those that cover the team on a daily basis. So I didn't reply. Usually I say, okay, got it, I'm fine. I don't have to ask a question, which is code for, look, we're gonna send the microphone around, and if we get to you, you'll be 8th, 9th on the list. So I didn't raise my hand, to ask a question. And I knew that, and luckily, I said, okay, if there's a chance to be a scrum, maybe I'll get a question in. But it was an hour late. We're sitting there. I got there, and I get there early all the time because I'm directionally challenged. I got there at 2:45 for a 3:30 presser. The man showed up and started the thing at 4:30. And I was joking with the reporters. I'm like, being funny. I'm like, he's probably going to claim I got stuck on 9-4. And everyone was joking and laughing like, this is normal. I was like, what do you mean this is normal? This is ridiculous. So everybody... And there were people standing in the back for the entire hour. I was like, my God. The jokes and the comments were bad, man. I was sitting there listening to it, following along. The reporters were just shaking their head. I'm like, this is how the Pistons get down? My God, the dignitary, the DOC shows up. And it was crazy. And then Tom Gores got into what he was saying, and oh my God. It was rough, man. He's like, I got this letter I should stick to. My daughter said, hey, just stick to this. But I'm not going to. I'm just going to talk about this and ramble. And I was like, oh, my God. I was like, yeah, he should have listened to the DOC and not spoken. Trajan, ultra serious, ultra professional, didn't even at one point seemed like he was going to get choked up because of the opportunity that was given. But Tom Gores made it weird with all the hugs references. And I'm like, Trajan, if you're a leader, you got to kind of tell the owner, look, dog, it's 2 o'clock. I'm going to bed. I got work to do tomorrow. I ain't out here trying to talk to you and hug you at 4:30 in the morning. I'm just going to tell you this. Boom, I don't need that many hours to tell you how I'm going to build a basketball team. But Tom just wanted to keep saying, I've never met anybody like Trajan. He can unite people, and I just feel like he's a CEO. And there was so much to talk about from Tom Gores' side. But really the big takeaway from Tom Gores was like, hey, I'm a billionaire. I know I built a $1 billion company and my basketball team sucks. So I'm probably going to just talk about how I built a $1 billion company and kind of do that with basketball. And so that's where he got his confidence from. So I related to that very much so in regards to, I understand he wanted to focus on his strengths. But sports fans were just looking at him like, because I was just sitting there going, oh God, this guy is just trying to talk like he knows something. And I caught the reaction afterwards where everybody's like, what is this guy talking about? Please make him stop talking about platinum equity. And then Trajan talks and he's ultra serious. And he's just, the one thing I thought that he said that most people could take away from is that they're probably going to acquire contracts, hopefully with the opportunity for assets. So that was my takeaway. But then they had a scrum and I was like, oh, this is my chance. And people were asking, and Jeff Rieger, give him credit, always bold and direct. I had a chance to talk to him afterwards and just thank him and say, hey, man, I learned a lot from you in covering sports. He's like, oh, man, thanks. And we always just chatted up a little bit. But in the end, I fired one off. So that's 2 now. I've gotten a question off to Sheila Hemp and now Tom Gores. 2/3 of the owners in town have met face-to-face with the DOC. And I just said directly, what took you so long to realize your front office structure didn't work? And it was crazy. As I was listening and filming, he's looking right at me and babbling. And everybody that responded was like, you asked a good question, but he just totally said the same thing he said at the podium and rambled on and on about, well, I just think that other teams kind of got built like the Suns, and it didn't work. And I was like, oh, man, that's not the reference you want to make. But in the end, I just left thinking, okay, Tom Gores needs to not talk publicly. But Trajan Langdon kind of gives the vibe of, okay, deserving of a chance, ultra serious, maybe has the proper mindset to unite everybody. The one thing you can say is it's his job. He's going to be the final boss, and he's got to put it all together. The Pistons finally realized, okay, maybe this faction situation is not going to work. Hopefully, Trajan can get everything together and unify the front office. And Tom Gores stole from the Lions, talking about grit and communication and collaboration, the word of the day for all these new owners that are trying to sell the fan base. But I'm curious, what was your takeaway? Did you find it almost as laughable as many people did regarding Tom Gores showing up late, being historically late all the time, and kind of just making it weird for everybody listening to whatever he was trying to deliver?
I think those were the big highlights that came out of this, right? Like my big takeaway from it was the owner is an absolute embarrassment. Like, I don't think he gets how to operate a high level sports business. Yes. Like, I don't think he understands what being an owner at this level is. To me, it really feels like he's more well suited to basically be an 8th grade soccer coach, like be in charge of that and basically cutting up the orange slices and rolling out the balls for kids to play. The fact that you call a press conference on a Friday, right? That's just a news dump. That's it's a BS tactic that a lot of sports organizations who are bad, it's what they do, because a lot of times the reporters and people can't get other people down there to attend the conference or to basically get the news out. And then there's this discussion that usually happens once the news comes out. Well, you put it up next to a weekend, everybody's off on the weekend, so that conversation just kind of lies dormant. And then we end up having a show like we're having here where it's almost a week later, we're finally getting a chance to talk about it. It's a strategic move done by bad organizations. So like that's number one. Number two, you show up over an hour late to the press conference that you call. Ooh. And then when you show up, everybody's kind of in disarray. There was like no organization. There were guys who were like, oh, I guess I got to introduce myself. It was very weird. It was very kind of chaotic. Best way I could describe it. And then you have Tom Gores speaking. And I feel like he always does a really poor job of trying to verbalize whatever it is that he's trying to communicate, I feel like communication from this guy is just not good. The one thing that you did take out of it that he said a lot of is he talked about what he's done with platinum equity. I don't necessarily know how that correlates to the Detroit Pistons. I get that you built a $1 billion business basically buying and selling property. I get it, right? But that's cool. That's what you're doing in California. That doesn't necessarily correlate to you owning the Detroit Pistons. And then he's a weird guy, man. Like, he is a strange guy. Like, he is Hollywood all day. The more and more I kind of watch different videos and kind of tap into the weird shit that goes on in Hollywood, there's a lot of weird stuff. You can find a lot of weird things. You want, just DM me and I'll send you some stuff. But Hollywood is a strange place, and Tom Gores is of that ilk. He is cut from that cloth. He is a weird guy. You heard a lot about hugs. You heard a lot about stuff going on at 4 a.m. You heard a lot about it basically being kind of touchy-feely and just like wants to love on Trajan Langdon. And to me, that is just weird, dude. That is odd. The way I look at it, right, we are from Detroit. It's a very blue-collar, put your nose to the grindstone, do your job until your job is done type of place. And Tom Gores gives off this very aloof, disconnected, weird, like I said, just weird vibe. And the fact that he kept kind of going back to the same 3 points, which was like a hug, platinum equity, and basically being like, we're going to be better. I've made money doing this, so I'm going to make money doing this. It was strange. It was really, really weird. And I felt like it was incredibly disrespectful to the members of the media who have to cover this team and who showed up for this press conference. Again, showing up over an hour late and then blaming it on the Grozeal traffic. Have you ever been on Grozeal? What? What are we talking about, dude?
Oh, man. It was
just absolutely bonkers to me. Look,
I was going to say this.
This is the other thing I didn't like about this press conference. It was the fact that he continued to sit up there. Like, this was supposed to be Trajan Langdon's moment. And you sitting there and basically fielding questions like, this one's for Trajan, and then I've got a follow-up for you, Tom. And so it was like 1-and-1. It really kind of messed up the flow of what should have been a really productive press conference and made it real herky-jerky. And the fact that he was so involved with it, to me, just kind of really took from a lot of it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's good. I was going to say that makes sense because I think that's what kind of people were thinking was from me just being an outsider, just sitting listening to it. They should have just did. Here's the portion where we're going to ask Tom questions, and then we'll let Trajan have the entire floor. Having it for both, it just dragged on, and you kind of would lose focus, and maybe that's intentional to do it like that. But I was just curious, what did you make of the whole angle of like business, like the CEO, like Trajan's the CEO. I recognize, I needed a CEO. But what he really meant was I need somebody in charge every day. Yep. And he just all he did was described it wrong. In theory, I understand what he's saying. He's like, I needed Trajan. Like every day I needed somebody to walk the halls and to unite everybody. And I believe from all the talks I had, it's Trajan, except he was using business terms. He should have said, I need a front office leader. I need a uniter. I need a collaborator. I need a general manager to run everything. And I need a strong president who understands everything. He should have just used president. Like that's his title. I need a president to unite everybody. But it kind of lent to the understanding that it's Trajan's job. I know nobody asked about Tellum and things like that. I think because he was right there in the front row. But I will say this. I do give Langdon the benefit of the doubt that he's going to try and unite everybody. He's got kind of a nice hiring in terms of the senior vice president that he added from Dallas, the coach that he hired that's an assistant that is solid in shooting. So he's starting to build out everything. And so I just think Tom Gores, again, like you said, the big thing on his side was he took away from what needed to be the highlight of let's just put all the literally Tom just needed 5 minutes. Hey, the part that was great that's on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. All he needed to say was we haven't won enough. I'm dedicated. We looked back and we figured out okay, this is what we need to do to go in a different direction to bring you guys a winner. And that's all he needed to say. He needed 5 minutes. Instead, the opening segment was like 15 to 17 minutes of him going all over the place. And yeah, you're absolutely right. And but luckily there was more, and there was a scrum afterwards where you can kind of get more direct questions. Rieger got a couple good ones in. Rhonda Moss, always great. She got a couple good ones in terms of, hey, you just gave Monty Williams a boatload of money. How is it that you can do that? And Tom just said, look, we analyzed it and we recognized that we just didn't think that future was going to be successful, and we made the deal. And everybody was just like, yeah, it's a lot of money, but we just had to do it. So I felt like the scrums were a little bit better than the organized talk, which dragged on and on. And again, starting late was crazy because it was a full house and a lot of people standing. And luckily nobody chimed in or chirped or anything like that. But yeah, it's a rough look. But I'm just curious from what Trajan said. I think the big takeaway was that he believes in Cade Cunningham, probably going to make a big financial commitment to him. And the idea is potentially adding assets. So meaning that like a player like a Tobias Harris who has a contract that maybe is looking to be dumped by another NBA team, but in order to do that, a team will say, hey, kind of like the Red Wings did. Well, they'll say, hey, can you take Jake Wallman and we'll give you a second rounder as well to get this contract off. And a team will be like, I don't really want that contract, but if you're throwing in a draft pick, well, we can look at it. And so that's where I think the Pistons need to do, and I think that's great. And I think that was at least one of the things you could take away from what Trajan Langdon said. And I don't think there's anything to complain about from what Langdon said. I just think that, here's the thing. I know you can't win the goal is not to win the press conference, but I think that, a Dan Campbell light type speech would have been great in regards to Trajan saying, this is a historic franchise that has not won. My job is to bring a winner and to turn around the fortunes. And I think that I understand how to win, and the goal is to win a championship. I can't wait to give Tom Gores this trophy. He deserves it for all the work he's going to do. I know that if I ever need anything, Tom will cut the check, go into the tax, no matter what it takes. I know what it takes, and I'm not going to give you a timeline, but I know that I want to have this vision of bringing you guys, the loyal fan base, a winner. Now, he said that, but just in a much more serious tone of like, hey, that's kind of how it was. So it wasn't inspiring all that much, but he had that calm, cool demeanor that a leader has, and that's fine. It's not like my cup of tea in regards to listening to it, but I just think that with the Pistons, it does have the feel of like, man, this is going to take like 5 more years. Like, you got to first get the bad contracts and then take everything up. But you do have, a couple of names that people are talking about. I'm curious, cuz did you see the trade that the Knicks made and how the Pistons were involved with Bojan going to the Nets? And it's just the dream trade that everybody kind of wishes a Detroit team would make. Multiple, over 4 draft picks coming to the Nets in a crazy deal for Mikal Bridges. And I just think most people say Bridges is not worth all of that. But if you're the Brooklyn Nets, you cashed in, I think, on the deal of the decade.
Yeah, no, for sure. And look, I think that's what Trajan Langdon is looking to do, right?
Hopefully.
He's going to be reshaping this roster. Like you said, the one thing you can take from him in this is he's got the task at hand of trying to rebuild this, trying to kind of purge this roster and figure out what pieces of this so-called core he wants to build around. And I think what you're going to see him do is it's probably going to happen, like you said, we're doing this just before the draft. This will be coming out just before day 2 of the draft. What I'm expecting him to do is him to take guys on this roster and ship them to other places for other guys with bloated contracts because they've got a ton of cap space, and he's looking for picks to be attached to them. I'm looking for him to take on basically dead bodies, but get draft picks with those dead bodies, because what he's walking into is something we touched on last week. What he's walking into is he's got a draft pick this year, but over the course of the next 3 years, the New York Knicks basically own his draft pick. Right? Like the draft pick that he's supposed to have is supposed to go to the Knicks. So he doesn't have a lot of capital. And it gets even more murky when you start going down years later and you start going into that second round. The draft capital that they have is all over the place. And it's really, really difficult to track. So I think what he's looking to do is he's looking to figure out which guy he wants to build around, maybe 2 guys he wants to build around, and then he's going to take on expiring deals, and he's going to force them to attach draft capital to that so he can then come back next year, come back the year after that, and really start to build this thing from the ground up. And I think he's looking for shooters. I think he's looking for guys who can play defense. I think he's looking to really hit the reset button on this. So if you're expecting this to be something that is rectified over the course of 2 or 3 years, I think you need to readjust your timeline. I think this is something, and we're going to talk about this a little bit next week. It's going to be the Tigers and what the Tigers are going to do with the trade deadline coming up. I think everybody has to readjust their timeline for when these teams are going to be successful. The Detroit Pistons aren't going to be successful next season. Detroit Pistons aren't going to be successful the year after that. Detroit Pistons aren't going to be successful the year after that. I'm looking at this being at least a 4 to 5 year rebuild process for them to be competitive and get into the playoffs. I think it's why this contract extension for Cade is so dangerous for this team because, again, you got to spend money, right? Because they're not even at the bottom of the salary cap. They're not even at the floor. But does re-signing Cade align with your timeline to be good? Because I could see this team maxing him out, signing him to a 4 or 5 year deal. And just as this team starts to kind of put it together, he's now back up for another contract. And you got to figure out what you want to do. I understand that he was a first overall draft pick the year he came out. I understand that this is a guy who was supposed to be the dude to kind of pick up the torch and be our superstar. It hasn't really worked. I don't know if it's going to work. He hasn't been healthy. He's not really a shooter. He's more of a pass-first point guard, which is fine. But you have to put shooters around him, and this team is void of shooters. So this is going to be the big task for Trajan Langdon. Now, do I think he has the ability to bring this team back to prominence? He seems like he is incredibly serious. He seems like he is incredibly dialed in. He seems very well spoken, and he seems like when he speaks, he's very calculated. He's not out here running his mouth. He's not babbling. He is the complete antithesis of this BS garbage owner that the Detroit Pistons have. He should be the guy who fronts everything. He should be the front man for this organization, not Tom Gores. Tom Gores needs to go in a box and just stay in California. Please do not come to the arena. Please do not talk about the Detroit Pistons. Please distance yourself from the Pistons as much as possible. Just leave your checkbook open for things that need to get done. That should be Tom Gores' role. All right. Trajan Langdon seems like he has a mind for this, and he seems like he has the acumen for this to happen. What I need Trajan Langdon to do is take this game plan that he is facilitating right now and just run with it. And I need him to run so hard with it, just lean into it. If it fails and burns, who the hell cares? It's not like this team's any good. It's not like this team's relevant right now. Give it a shot. See what the hell happens. What's the worst thing that can happen? You can be even more inept. I mean, right now, this team is one of the worst teams in the NBA. I also need him to push people out of that circle, right? I feel like there are too many voices, and there's been different articles that have come out over the course of the week leading up to this press conference. Arn Tellem needs to be in charge of one thing and one thing alone, and that is facilitating different business deals for the team, right? It is being on that business side, that marketing side. He needs to not have any control over the front office. I do not need Arn Tellem's influence on the front office whatsoever. I need this to be Trajan Langdon's ship. I need him to be the captain of it. I need him to be the one in charge. I need the buck to start and stop with him. And I do not need Tom Gores getting involved. I do not need Arn Tellem getting involved. I do not need anybody else getting involved. I need Trajan Langdon to pick his head coach, which we're going to talk about here in a few minutes because it's really weird. We are on the precipice of the draft and we still don't have a head coach, which is an odd thing for a team to be in this position, but this is what happens when Tom Gores is your owner and everything just gets drug out. But I need Trajan Langdon and whomever he hires as the head coach to be symbiotic. You've seen this happen with the Detroit Lions with Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. Those are two guys who might not speak the same language, but they think the same exact way, and it works. And everything about it works, and it's awesome to see. Trajan Langdon needs to find his head coach like that. They need to be of the same mind. They need to be of the same vision, and they need to put that into practice. And they need other people in that building to stay out of their rooms. and let them do what they have to do. Do you think Trajan Langdon has the ability to right this ship, bring this team back to prominence? Again, this is a team that has 3 NBA championships. This is a team that has 3 Larry O'Brien trophies. There's not a lot of teams that have that many or more. This is like one of, I think it's like 8 teams in all of the NBA that can say that they hold this claim of having this many trophies and being a team that is this relevant. You have to remember, this is a team that was so dominant in the 80s and in the 90s, and then again in the early 2000s. This was a team that everybody pointed to and was like, look, they did it their way, and it was awesome to watch. This team has been abysmal since Tom Gores has taken over. Trajan Langdon looks to be the guy who may be able to get this right. Do you feel like he is the guy?
I do. I feel like, at least in terms of competence, in terms of, we'll have our first look at the selection at number 5 and then the decision regarding the head coach. And maybe it's Bickerstaff. Maybe you get somebody else. Maybe you find the next hot young coach. But like I said, I view it as a transitional coach no matter who it is, because it's just going to take forever to develop. So just find anybody that can develop shooters and work with young players that can handle business. So I'm looking forward to seeing those decisions. But yeah, I have confidence. I think that Trajan Langdon, at least from the experience that you saw, built solid. I think the work that he did in Utah was excellent. I think he got a lot of good experience. Being part of the San Antonio organization really bodes well for the Pistons. And then the work that he did with New Orleans, I think, gives him the ultimate credit. And look, I know that many people will poo-poo the fact that, hey, Arn Tellem was his agent when he was a player, but it kind of lends to maybe, look, we don't want to scapegoat Troy Weaver and Monty Williams, but they didn't work. And maybe Arn was like, look, follow our vision. And Troy Weaver, look, it's probably a combination of everybody that deserves some blame, but the part that Arn will probably say, if you ask him and give him some truth serum, he'll say, look, we had a vision that we want to unite. And Troy just kept finding these dudes and reclamation projects in the Wisemans and the people that, he gave the contracts to Isaiah Stewart. And Tom did say publicly, I felt like the free agent decisions that we made were not that good last year. So there is a lot of blame to go around. And maybe it's one of those deals where, yes, Tellem deserves some blame for being part of a dysfunctional unit, but now he can say, well, I got my guy, and if you follow our lead in our faction, follow the NWO, maybe we'll have some popularity and some interest. And I think that that's at least where you can say, you know what, let's look at it from the other side, where Arn is like, damn, this dude won't listen. He keeps finding all these centers. I don't want all these centers. There's no way. And then you got Monty Williams, who's like, I'm going to use exactly each and every member of the roster that you give me to show everybody that they all suck. And everyone's like, dude, cut your bench. Use Ivy and Kate together. Figure it out. And everyone's like, he's like, no. And so maybe you cut out the factions that were not listening, and now you have everybody on the same page. It may end up in the same boat where nobody still knows what they're doing, but at least you get rid of some of the chaos in that organization, in the front office. I think that's what's gonna help. And so I think the first thing that's going to unite the fan base is if they are able to maybe get Dalton Connect or Cody Williams. I think there's a lot of good opportunity to improve this basketball team. I think some of the other names that could fit, Ron Holland from the G League, Devin Carter. I look at the situation in which, do they take a chance on a guard? I know they just need so much outside shooting that, to me, I'm going with Chalk. Everybody's talking about him. 6'10", 209 pounds from the G League Ignite, and that's forward Matas Buzelis. And I just think that everybody's talking about him because of the relationship with Tellem's son, his agent. I just think that his outside shooting, it's something that right away doesn't make him a starter, but I think that he's got a reliable jumper. He's got the size to maybe make the transition to power forward. And I think that many people will always look to, in terms of the Pistons, finding the best two-way player, and I think he probably fits the mold. But a lot of people like Connect. A lot of people like Cody Williams in regards to their strong three-point shooting percentage. So I'm curious, which player do you think that's getting talked about is the right pick for the Pistons at number 5? Who would you be happy with if the name is called and they don't trade down?
Oh, bro, I have no idea.
Now looking
These players in this draft are
all over the place. Yeah, it's not. It's tough.
Yeah, dude. This is one of those drafts where, as a Pistons fan, you're upset that they're drafting at 5. You're like, man, like how the hell? It seems like whenever the Pistons get to draft high, it's usually a bum ass draft. There's no Wimbies. There's no guy who you can point to and be like, that dude is a certified stud and we've got a shot at him. It just doesn't happen. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I've got no idea who the right choice is for this team. And again, this goes more to the fact of I don't know who the coach is. I don't know what Trajan Langdon's actual vision for this team is. So I think you and I are of a similar mindset.
Shoot.
This team needs to go out. Yes, this team needs to go out and find a shooter. This team needs to go out and find a guy who is going to shoot above league average and needs to at least be at league average behind the three-point arc. This is a team that is absolutely abysmal at three-point shooting. This is a team where if you are just the baseline, just like the most average guy in the league, you'll be better than everybody else on this team at three-point shooting. This team is horrible at three-point shooting. So if you can find a guy who can hit for average behind the three-point line and a guy who is slightly above average, a shooter, I think they fit in perfectly on this team and they make this team instantly better. That's what they need. They need shooters and they need guys who can D other guys up. So look, who is that guy? I don't know, man. I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass and tell you it's this guy, it's that. I have no clue. I think what I would like to see the Pistons do is possibly trade back, try to acquire a couple of assets, maybe get some of those dead bodies I was talking about, and try to find a guy that they like maybe a little bit later on in the draft. I don't think this is a very good draft. I think there might be one or two guys who could possibly hit, but to tell you who those guys are, I've got no clue. And again, I find this to be a really difficult position for the Detroit Pistons as a franchise to be in, and more specifically for Trajan Langdon to be in, because you don't have a head coach. You don't know what style they want to run. A lot of times when you're going into the draft, you're looking for a guy that the head coach can develop, a guy that the head coach is high on and can fit his system and fit what he wants to run. So unless Trajan Langdon already knows who his head coach is going to be, I find this to be a really tough spot for him. Or maybe it's just incredibly easy because the roster is so void of talent. He's just going out there and he's like, I'm going to draft the best available guy. I'm going to draft the best available shooter because we need it. Maybe it is that simple. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe I'm making it more complicated. But I feel like not having a head coach hired yet and not knowing who the head coach is a bit of a kick in the nuts and a bit of something that hampers you when trying to figure out which talent you want to take at 5 or which talent you want to, as you move back in the draft, you want to take. Does not having the head coach, do you think it makes it harder on a guy like Trajan Langdon who's stepping into this, looking at this roster and being like, look, we've got holes everywhere. I've got to fill stuff, but I have no idea what scheme or what system we're going to run, but I'm just going to go out there and do stuff anyways. Is the roster, because it is so limited, does that make it easier for him, or not having the head coach, does that make it a little bit more difficult for him in this draft?
No, I think that you're going to be aligned. I think that what type of, you probably have a vision of what type of player you need based on the coach you're going to hire. So I think it's a little bit overrated that people are concerned that the Pistons don't have a head coach. I think that if you have talent as a head coach, you can kind of work with the talent that you have that the general manager or the president of basketball operations picks for you. And in the end, you have now a roster with Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, and Jalen Duren. The rest, the Italian can be, a shooter that people respect. Isaiah Stewart maybe has a role. But the rest of the players you can kind of intersperse and involve in trades or move on from. James Wiseman's set to be a free agent, thankfully. And you recognize, I'm still shocked that Troy Weaver got an opportunity to advise the Washington franchise. I'm like, oh my God, how the hell does this guy have a leg to stand on? But of course, the people in charge there are familiar with Troy Weaver, so he gets another opportunity. For the Pistons, like you said, shooter, somebody that can just kind of stabilize and have some impact, maybe hopefully not in the same mold as an Asar Thompson, someone that can shoot. And I do think that they'll get that, and we'll see when the draft eventually comes up, and we'll analyze exactly how the fit takes place. But I do think that there's a chance the Pistons trade down if the right offer comes and you can get another draft pick, or you have an opportunity to really get some assets in the future, maybe a player, maybe you make that deal. Real fast, before we start talking about the Red Wings, what do you make of the Tobias Harris rumors? I just kind of am indifferent because we've seen him before. I think he's a little bit of an upgrade, but not a move the needle kind of guy. I don't think that he can single-handedly be a difference maker. I think that he's kind of fits the mold of, okay, a bigger contract that a team could move on from. If they can get a draft pick for it in the mix, similar to what happened in the NHL, I think that, you know what, maybe you consider it, taking on some deals and some contracts. But it looks like right now it's about, hey, adding a couple pieces that can help Cade Cunningham out a little bit. Tobias Harris, thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs down.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's a piece that you need to have in this roster right now.
Just stay young. Just stay young, and look, it's you just can't be 14 win bad. You got to be like 25 win bad, and not blow so many games. And I think Monty Williams cost the Pistons 10 games with some of the coaching blunders and lack of adjustments that were made in the second half. So we'll see, and we'll talk further in the future regarding the pick, who the head coach is going to be. Maybe Tom. Well, like I said, Tom Gores only speaks when there's firings, and maybe twice a year. So we'll see if he ever evolves into a leader. But he said, and he told me, he said, hey, and look, the Detroit Sports Podcast got the Pistons owner to apologize. He said, sorry it took so long, but I feel like I can thread together leadership now in the front office with the choices I make. So we did the best we could. He did go on a rambling answer that didn't make any sense, but you got it on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. A direct question. What took you so long to figure out your front office didn't work? And it just came to me. I spit it out there, and it came out perfectly. And I think that Tom Gores, give him credit for, from what you hear, that he is competitive. And if the time comes and he needs to go into the luxury tax, he's cutting the checks. Don't worry about that. It's going to happen. Everybody's saying it that's at least spitting out words that are talking about the Pistons are saying, this guy wants to win. He just doesn't know how. And hopefully now he handed the reins to Trajan Langdon, and you do the job, and I'll step to the back. You be the CEO, and you report to me, and we'll figure it out. And so, first big test Wednesday, the NBA Draft for Trajan Langdon. Because Game 7 of the NHL Stanley Cup Finals drew huge ratings, over 10 million, bigger than baseball. It was intriguing. All of Canada was rooting for Edmonton. I was rooting for Edmonton. I thought that their comeback was epic, but it's true. It's incredibly difficult to beat a team 4 times in a row, and you just got a sense with 7 minutes left as they're trying to call upon Connor McDavid and everybody else to step it up. They were just gassed, and the Panthers, they did exactly what they needed to do, tighten it down defensively, and Bobrovsky stood on his head as shot after shot came in. It was a great Stanley Cup final, and it lived up to the billing. I thought kudos to the Panthers for putting everything together. Zito, I thought Paul Maurice just exhibited everything that you'd want in a coach after chasing the cup. He's basically cussing out the cup, saying, God damn it, took me forever to get you. And the relief that he felt hoisting it up, I thought it was great. And what the Panthers did, which was I loved, because we all love Stanley Cup celebrations, they grabbed the cup twice. They were like, once ain't enough. Let's go do it again. And I thought it was great. The cup finals were great. And now you can turn your attention to the Red Wings, who made a move. And you're like, wait a minute. Everyone's like, wait a minute. You parted ways with somebody that was kind of popular in a defenseman in Waltman that everyone was like, wait a minute. Oh, shoot. You can't pay the $3.5 million? Oh, man. Well, that's because Moritz Seider and some players on your team are going to start commanding some contracts. And you're like, oh, man. Steve Yzerman kind of maybe made a move that people are like, oh, that's kind of a question mark, but still with some trust. It's kind of weird when you look at how people view the Wings and Yzerman. They're like, I don't think I like that trade, but Steve must have something in his corner there to handle everything and to figure it out. But Raymond and Seider need to get scratched a fat check, and it looked like this was a cost-cutting move, but it maybe opened up opportunities for a blockbuster trade. I could see that, but at the same token, it looks like the cap cost the Detroit Red Wings a defenseman that was solid. What'd you make of the deal? What'd you make of Steve Yzerman? I think that he just kind of, again, it's not really worth talking about a lot, but his talk with the media last week was a bunch of smoke and a bunch of seriousness and not a lot of meat to the topic because Yzerman holds everything close to the vest. But, I just think that there's opportunities. You're at least hearing some goaltenders that have some prowess being talked about with the Wings. So I'm curious to get your sense of what you make when you heard the trade. A lot of people were scratching their head. And what's your early thoughts regarding the Wings heading into the draft?
So I was a little bit shocked, and you start to kind of think about stuff. Okay, well, this move for Jake Waltman basically freed up some cap space that this team's going to need. They ended up making a trade earlier where they sent a minor league player over to Nashville, got that second round pick. That second round pick was paired up with Waltman to get them to take on that contract. So you're like, okay, bit of a cap dump, kind of looking at what's going on with this team. Obviously, they've got two guys that they've got to sign in Sider and Raymond. Anticipating those guys probably getting anywhere from $15 to $16 million combined. I could see $7.5, $8 million for both those guys. So you're like, all right, what are you going to do with the rest of that cap money, right? There's talks about a guy like Draisaitl being available because Edmonton's not sure if they're going to be able to sign him. Mitch Marner is a guy who's been talked about quite a bit. There are goaltenders out there that this team could desperately use. I could see Steve Yzerman, when free agency rolls around on Monday, going out there and slinging a massive checkbook and getting a premier player. Now, look, I don't know if Patrick Kane's coming back. I know that the two have been talking quite a bit. I'm not sure if the conversation is basically stalling out due to dollar amount, or maybe it's stalling out due to years on that contract, because I would believe Steve Yzerman doesn't necessarily want to sign Patrick Kane for more than 2 years. Probably doesn't want to do 2 years. Probably wants another 1 year deal for Patrick Kane. I would assume that he probably would be open to signing him for about $5 million. Kane might be cool with that, but wants more security on that back end. So, look, I like what Patrick Kane brought, but if you can go out and get a guy like Leon Draisaitl, or you can go out and you can get a guy like a Mitch Marner and bring them in. Look, both those guys a little bit younger. Both those guys obviously deserve hefty raises. Marner would be great because I believe he's a little bit younger than Draisaitl and just incredibly talented. So you could pair those guys up, and all of a sudden you've got some forwards that are pretty incredible. Also, moving on from Jake Waltman, you end up freeing up a spot defensively. They've got a bit of a girth of talent defensively. So this just kind of opens up a space so guys can kind of move up and fill out those roster spots. So it's twofold with that move, but I feel like he's loading up to go out there with a monster checkbook and get around, which leads us to the draft on Friday night. So the NHL draft is Friday night. The Wings are drafting 15th. I don't know if you've gone through and you've looked at any mock drafts or you've looked at any of the draft candidates. Again, the NHL draft is kind of a weird thing. It's one of those things where you go out, similar to baseball, where you go out, you draft a guy, and they don't make an immediate impact. They basically sit in your minor league system for, if they're really, really good, they'll sit down there for maybe a year or two. If they need a little bit of seasoning, it'll be 3 or 4 years. Some guys, goaltenders specifically, are usually down there for 5+ years. Some guys don't ever get out of the minor league system. So it's a bit of a crapshoot when you go to the NHL draft. Wings picking at 15, there's some expectations here. Do they go out? Do they find a forward? When I've gone through a couple different mock drafts, it looks like there are some talented forwards that might be available. Might be. But what I would like to see the Wings do, and what my expectations for the Detroit Red Wings are, is to pair that first-round pickup with something and go out and get a guy. Maybe it's those future considerations from San Jose. Maybe it's trading that first-round pick, and maybe it's trading another future first-round pick, or trading a later-round pick, or even a prospect that you might have to go out and get a guy who's going to make an immediate impact next year. Don't be surprised if the Red Wings, I'm telling you right now, don't be surprised if the Red Wings trade that 15th overall pick in this draft to go and make a play for somebody to make an impact on the roster next year, whether it's a goaltender or whether it's a forward. I don't think they'll be looking at defense because, again, I feel like they've got a bit of a logjam with some of their defenders, and they've got to make a bit of a decision on those defenders. But I'm expecting them to possibly move that first-round pick to go get a guy to play in one of those top 6 forward roles, or to go out there and get a goaltender. What are your expectations for the Red Wings going into this NHL draft? Do you think that they can move on from that first round pick, or are you expecting them to maybe go out there and try to get a talented forward that they can develop, or maybe even a talented defenseman that they could develop?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? The loss of Wallman and the Giddy is going to be gone. It's fascinating when you look at the Red Wings because people are looking at it now like, okay, year 6, you need some talent. But I just think that a lot of the young talent is going to be from Grand Rapids, and I think draft pick sucks because the NHL draft is more like draft and stash away for 5 years. It's very rare. Like 2 players from the whole draft come in and are able to start right away. And you do give Yzerman credit for Lucas Raymond, who's emerging now as a goal scorer, and Maurice Seider, who's widely regarded as a top young defenseman that can do some things big, strong, and is expected to captain the ship moving forward. The Red Wings, with draft picks, it's like, okay, it's going to be a collection of talent. Nobody's heard of them. I don't watch, Finnish hockey, Swedish hockey. I don't watch all those kind of leagues. You read about them, but you don't know, nobody really knows all that much about the picks. So to me, maybe you trade down, but Steve Yzerman did say he's not looking for anything of a blockbuster kind of move, and maybe you believe it because really, what's going to be a big demand for the 15th pick? So you do read the stuff, you do read all the good work from those around, and you hear decent names of those that could be around at 15. Branzak Nyard is somebody that people say could be a fit. From Sweden, everybody's like, oh, okay, he's a player that everybody thinks about. Center Beckett Sinecki out of the OHL. Many people thought that his rise over the last couple games of the OHL season with 22 points was great. But I think that everybody knows my tie. So I have a name. I wrote him down, and I'm just going to go safe. When you just watched the Florida Panthers win by shutting down Connor McDavid for 2 games, and they got away from it when they started letting Edmonton score a bunch of points, you need a big defenseman. And universally, many people think that he's going to be gone, but I don't care. I want MSU freshman defenseman, and I quote, Artem Levshunov. Artem Levshunov from the Michigan State University. And I think he's great. I think he's going to be a top 5 pick. Probably not going to be there, but hell, he looks good in the pictures. And I did get a chance to watch a couple of the games, and Michigan State did choke away opportunities, and I did see their defense and goaltending be a strength for that team. So I do know of him, but I'm just going to express my clear bias of getting a defenseman, but he probably won't be there. Trade up for him. Do your thing, Steve. Get the guy. He's a defenseman, a big defenseman that you could roll with. So you can see we're talking in jest here. But anybody they get, look, draft and stash, and we'll figure it out. But I'm curious, with the youth movement, would you be okay if there's some struggles with some of the youth that get called up next year? Because it sucks, because I'm like, come on, man, it's year 6, and I'm not down for a 10-year plan. I think that, the youth movement maybe should have happened this year. You don't sign Kane, you just get development, and you just let him go. And you bomb out, and you do what you got to do. And you move it along. But I do think because I will say this, there's a lot of players in the developmental system that people around the NHL say, hey, look out. They're there. When they come in 2-3 years, the Red Wings, when Steve Yzerman says sustained success, he's building it in a way where if he just gets lucky with one more free agent that can score, and maybe it is from Edmonton, maybe you do get somebody else, the goalies that you're looking at, there's a chance for sustained success. I like some of the names that you're hearing in regards to some young developmental prospects. What do you make of what the Wings have coming up behind some of the veterans?
I think it's interesting. Look, this is a thing where I believe Steve Yzerman and his role with the Detroit Red Wings is kind of in a similar situation to where Trajan Langdon is, right? You've got some young talent. You got to make decisions on it. And again, that's why I think Waldman was moved because there are guys that are coming up, and you got to make some room for some of these guys.
Baby.
So
talk Marco Casper to me.
So you got to make some decisions on these guys. And in order to do that, you got to clear some space. So look, I think a guy like Marco Casper, I think he will get a shot next season. I think what's going to end up happening is you're going to end up signing Raymond and Sider. I believe he's going to make a massive move in free agency. That's going to eat up a lot of money. So you got to fill out the rest of your roster. And I think that's where you tap into some of those young guys that you've drafted. You tap into some of that young talent. You start to bring it up. And look, maybe they start third, fourth line, but they're up here, they're skating. You're seeing some things that they can do, and I think they're getting the experience. So I think you're going to see a bit of I don't want to say a glut of that young talent, but you're going to start seeing those young guys start to matriculate through this system, and they're going to get shots because you've got to figure out what you have. You got to find out what you've got going on, and then you've got to make a decision. Do I trade these guys for something else, or do we just kind of release them and let them go? Because you've seen with Steve Yzerman, doesn't really have a problem with releasing talent. He has no problem with just letting guys go. Like, yep, you're not going to work here, so we're going to release you. And the guys just kind of go off into the sunset. So I think you're going to start to see some of the guys from Grand Rapids start to come up and start to make the big boy club. And I think some of it has to do with maybe some of the cap limitations because you're now signing a lot of your own guys. You're signing a lot of high-end contracts. You look at Dylan Larkin's contract. You look at DeBrincat's contract. You look at what Sider and what Raymond are expected to sign for. Those are all very large contracts. You can't have guys that have a ton of money like that on your roster and be able to continue to operate at a high level. So you got to kind of offset those large contracts with that young talent that you've drafted. So I think that's where what he's done and what he's kind of helped farm down in Grand Rapids, this is where I think it has to start paying dividends for this team to make the playoffs. So I think you do see them this year.
Okay. And then, like you said, everybody's excited. Augustine and Sebastian Cossa will be battling it out to be the Wings goalie of the future, and I think that's great for the Red Wings moving forward. So like I said, patience. It's tough for sports fans. 6 years, no playoffs. I mean, come on. But, 10-point improvement this season from last year. They had improvements in terms of defensively and in certain areas in terms of special teams and power play, but just not good enough in terms of the drought and having 2 years in a row where you need to step your game up with an injury, and they went the exact opposite direction, which is kind of weird in a situation when you would expect, okay, they've kind of had some experience at certain points, but look, you got to make the moves, and it's a salary cap situation, and Steve Yzerman has to manage it, and we'll see what ends up happening. All right, one last thing. Did you hear the rumor? There's potentially rumors that Holland ends up with the Blackhawks. Good fit, concerning. I am concerned, though, now that the Panthers, I think when you see what they're about, they're not going away anytime soon. And now Edmonton is going to be a situation in which they're going to be supremely hungry to come back. There's no way Connor McDavid doesn't win 2 cups with the talent that he has and what he brings to the table. You probably need a better goalie, and maybe you move on from a young, inexperienced coach to take it to the next level. But Connor McDavid is all world. A little corny to win the Conn Smythe. I know it's happened before, but it's just, you probably should have given it to Bobrovsky based on what he did. I get the idea of the emphasis on the player that was the best throughout the playoffs, but at the same token, it just always is weird when you give a major award to somebody that doesn't win the Stanley Cup. But I'll say this. If you guys go back and watch, you're looking at, okay, Tkachuk was awesome. We always wanted him here at the Red Wings. You looked at Keith Tkachuk as a bruiser, a guy that was always in shape. Bro gained like 50 pounds and looks like a Michigander. I was like, holy shit, that's Keith Tkachuk. Dude's got a beard cut the size of, it's hefty. The man has put on weight. And so I thought the best tweet of the week from us at Detroit Podcast was, damn, Keith Tkachuk retired and was like, I ain't going to the gym and I ain't eating healthy for the rest of my life. He looks like a completely different dude than the dude. Like, literally, it felt like last week that I saw Keith Tkachuk when he was young, battling the Wings year after year with the Blues, and how nasty of a player he was. My God, he let himself go. And then the other thing that was real cool was when you saw the Panthers fans and things like that, you just saw the passion that a lot of the new fans had in regards to the Cup. They were loud, they were excited, and things like that. So it was a fun run, man, in my opinion. I thought, hey, you got those extra games, but for the Red Wings, it just seems like the more you talk about hope, the further it does seem like success is. Like, we're still talking 5 years just to get to a playoffs. Can we handle a 6-year wait, 7-year wait, and then the process of like 2-3 years where you get to the first round and you get defeated and your goalie's, man, it's like, geez, that's a long wait. Where I was thinking about it one day where you're like, why people get mad as sports fans is by the time you wait 7-8 years, you've had so much disappointment that the waiting and the winning doesn't even catch up to all the annoyance that you felt going, oh my God, it's been 7, 8 years of not getting to the postseason, could be one more, and then you're going to start to have some playoff pain. So that's like decades at a time for sports fans, and that's why I think a lot of Detroit sports fans are angry and pissed because the Pistons, Wings, Lions, and Tigers have gone through a significant drought, and it just makes it super tough to be patient. But look, if there's some guy that you can trust, I think it's Steve Yzerman. So we'll see moving forward with the Red Wings. But are you getting a little bit impatient waiting on this, or are you still down for, all right, let's look at these young cats. Let's look at the goalies coming up. Let's look at all these moves. Or are you saying, come on, man, let's hurry this shit up already?
I think this is the year, if he doesn't make the playoffs, we've got to start having a really serious conversation about whether or not he needs to be replaced. So, look, last year they missed the playoffs by 1 point, okay? A little bit tough to choke down into stomach, but it happens, right? And that 1 point could have came anywhere. They had, like a 7-game losing streak, and that really cost them. It was very similar to what happened the year prior. I think with what he's going to do in free agency, because again, I'm very hopeful that he's going out swinging a big baseball bat in free agency this year. I think what he's going to do in free agency, I think the steps that you've seen with Lucas Raymond and you've seen with Mo Seider, I think those guys taking steps forward in their development last season, I think it's going to continue. It's going to pay dividends this upcoming year. I expect them to make the playoffs. I expect them to be a much more dangerous team. I think when the playoffs started, you and I had a conversation, and I basically said it's a good thing they didn't make it to the playoffs because they would have just been fodder for whoever. They weren't on a level that was anywhere close to anybody else. So I think you kind of see that, you witness it, you see what it took for Florida to win it, and you've seen what it took for Edmonton to get there, right? And just to kind of touch base on what you said about Edmonton, I think where you're coming from with Edmonton, I think you're completely off base. I think their young head coach, I think he did a fantastic job. I think he's going to stay. I think Connor McDavid eventually will win a Stanley Cup. I don't know if it'll be with Edmonton, though. That's my big question. They have to figure out what they're going to do with Draisaitl because he's incredibly talented. He is, if you want to say he's Batman and McDavid's Robin, and you want to say McDavid's Batman and Draisaitl's Robin, whatever. These guys are yin and yang, and they contribute so much offensively to that team. That team needs to address some of their defensive shortcomings. I think their goaltending was just fine. I think where they got let down was with their defense. I think their top 2 defenders are very good. Those back 4, specifically Nurse, was a bit of an albatross throughout most of the playoffs and had a horrible playoff run. I think he cost them a couple of games. So I think they have enough talent. They've got to do some tweaking to their defense, maybe add another affordable piece that can score goals and help create. But I think Edmonton eventually will get there. But you look at what Florida needed to do to get there. You look at what Edmonton needed to do to get there. You look what Florida did to win the whole damn thing. I think you can take stuff out of that and you can help shape your team and really figure out that next step that this team needs to make, this organization needs to make. And I think they get into the playoffs this upcoming season. Again, not seeing what they've done with anything in free agency, but I think that they're going to do enough. At least my hope is that they're going to do enough to get into the playoffs next year. But if they don't, we definitely have to have that conversation, and we've got to talk about replacing Steve Yzerman, which is going to suck.
Ooh, yeah, especially with all the support that he's garnered and looking at what's out there, it's tough. Good general managers don't just fall on trees. All right, we got about 2 minutes left. And I don't know if you've heard the sensation, but we got to get your sense of if your wife was friends with this girl and you end up finding out that she goes viral for making these statements.
That hawk to and spit on that thing. You get me?
She makes these statements, goes viral regarding hot Tua, spit on that thing. It's gone everywhere. I was walking literally with kids at the Detroit Golf Club, and I swear I can't confirm it, but some golfers or some friends of some golfers that were on the putting green just let out a hot Tua, spit on that thing. Liv Morgan said it on a digital platform on WWE on social media. I'm like, holy crap. This girl has gone famous, united the country, and all the guys are like, hell yeah, we like some of that. And all the girls are like, that's disgusting. If your wife's friend is this girl and she's having some fun and she says that, what do you say to her the first time she comes over after some shit like that goes viral? What does Adam the Jock Straczynski say? Do you just crack a smile and say, girl, what the fuck? Or do you go, damn, look, Haley, you can't talk like that. Damn. What the hell did you think you were doing? Do you be strict? Do you be supportive? What does Jock do when he finds out that someone he knows goes viral for acting a fool, maybe getting drunk and just spitting out shit in camera? Look, everybody's on camera all the time. We all take pictures. We all, like to do shit like that for the most part. People satisfy their egos nowadays through social media. But if something like this happens where it's like way the talk of the town, cult phenomenon, what do you say to her? Do you sit her aside and be a friend? Do you laugh, or do you go, I could enjoy some of that? Or how do you do that? Get some advice?
I'm definitely not doing that.
Okay.
But I would ask her to show me her method and her go-to move for it.
Yeah, like
she can demonstrate. I'd probably hand her a banana or a carrot.
Yeah, demonstrate. Can you demonstrate this hot Tua thing? Like, it's weird to think about that we're that close to somebody acting a fool and getting in trouble. What would you say to her? Like, okay, she comes over, she's probably gonna laugh at first, and then your wife's gonna be like, girl, come on, like, what the hell were you thinking? And she's gonna say, well, I just was having a good time. I didn't think it was gonna go viral like that. What do you say to her legitimately for the first sentence or two? What do you do to try to make sense of that kind of situation?
I would be like, what were you thinking? Like, why would you not think that would not go viral? Yeah. But like I said, I would be like, so here's this. Show me what you mean and show me how you do it, because now I'm interested.
Yeah, you're interested. Yeah, exactly. It's like everybody wants to see it. Like, exactly. Like, if there were no repercussions, I would send a message being like, that sounds like fun. What does this entail? Exactly. I would not take it. It sounds like fun the way she said it. Well, we all understand what she was talking about, but it's unfortunate because I think you're reading. I don't know if it's true or not, but you're seeing that she's been, let go of her job. She's going to be judged by half the country. Look, I just laughed at it and moved on. I'm not a judgmental type. I'm more silly, like you said. I'm similar to you. I'd be like, I definitely want to see what the hell this means, or I would want to know like what's been the impact.
Legit, she got fired from her job.
That's what they're saying, but who knows?
What?
Yeah. There's like it's from a site that's called Streamly Fans, so who knows if it's legitimate or not? But look, there's going to be some ramifications of doing something like this, so we'll see. But it has gone viral. It has been real silly. A lot of these people that are content creators are going around and making content by just asking people dumb questions. But this one was above the fray, and it went around the world, and it's become a cult phenomenon. And you literally have heard it at the Live Golf Tour to Bryson DeChambeau after he hits it. You're going to hear it a lot more. It's funny as hell. And I guess all Doc and Jock can do is leave you with this. If you hawk Tua, we'll talk Tua. Yeah, brother. We'll see everybody next week on the latest edition of Doc and Jock.
You fucking podcasters. I said don't let them in here.